Welcome everybody, it's Mary Fish with Stampin' Pretty and StampinPretty.com. I'm an independent Stampin' Up! Demonstrator and I sell the products that I'm going to share with you today on my blog, StampinPretty.com. Please stop by my blog, StampinPretty.com, for daily tips, inspiration, paper crafting ideas, free PDF tutorials, as well as the latest Stampin' Up! Promotions and offers. Today I'm going to share with you my 5 best tips for heat embossing. And I used heat embossing on this sweet little 4 1/4 square card. I love the look of our white Stampin' Emboss powder on black cardstock. It gives kind of that cool chalkboard look. And I'm also giving you a sneak peek of a stamp set where that So Glad We Are Friends came from. It's called Incredible Like You, and it will be available on January 3rd, 2019 in the Occasions catalog. And Incredible really describes that cool font. We're going to use the I Just Adore You, which I've already mounted onto my Stamparatus. So my 5 tips. Number 1 is to use this Stamparatus for 2 reasons versus clear blocks. It allows you to re-stamp. So if you don't get perfect coverage the first time, you can re-stamp in the exact same place and get that coverage right where you want it. In addition, sometimes with a clear block, you can get a little bit of ink on one of the corners of the block, and sometimes that will transfer onto your surface. And when you heat emboss, you're going to be disappointed when you see those little marks on the side. The Stamparatus avoids both of those things. Next is an embossing powder, which has a chalk-like substance that you can wipe that kind of creates a little dusty barrier that helps with some of those strays. Quick tip for you, don't be tempted to wipe away a little bit of that chalkiness until after you heat emboss. The reason being is if you have any kind of moisture on your hands, you may transfer it and it could affect the heat embossing when you're about to heat emboss. So I would say be patient. You can always wipe it down right afterwards. That was tip number 2 about the embossing buddy. The third tip is to be sure your Versamark ink pad is well inked. And I mean really good and juicy. We sell a refill that allows you to kind of keep that nice and juicy at all times. I just used it because having a good amount of the Versamark ensures that you're going to have a lot of sticky ink, I guess we could say, to attract the Stampin' Emboss powder. So that is number 3, is to make sure that the Versamark pad is well inked. And I'm going to go ahead and transfer this and just make sure I get good and even coverage. And as I said, with the Stamparatus, I could actually stamp this a second time. So I'm going to set that aside and I'm going to bring in some additional tools that you might not normally think about. So I have, for starters, I have our grid paper and I have white Stampin' Emboss powder. I also put the date on the side. Our Stampin' Emboss powder has a shelf life of about 3 years, and after that point, sometimes the results can be compromised. So I write the date on here so that I know when I got it. And I'm gonna just sprinkle this on, and I use the grid paper for 2 reasons. It keeps a lot of the excess in place, and I can also use it as a little funnel to put the leftover away. I know some people do some really cool things with a spoon and a container and they just have really things ready to go, but I've just always adapted and used this. So I'm gonna fold this way and just show you how easy it is to just pour that right back into the container with very little mess. Now you really can't reuse that grid paper because it's going to have just a little bit of the Stampin' Emboss powder, but it's again a perfect way to keep your surface area clean as well as funnel the remaining back. So now I'm going to take a good look at this, and it looks really, really good, but sometimes you might have a few little flyaways. So I found that our Take-A-Pick tool, which I love because it has piercing, it has scoring, it has a little spatula that you can use to move embellishments around, and it also has a sticky end that you can use to add sequins and things. But I discovered that the sticky end is great for any little flyaways. I don't have too many, but I have a few down here, and it picks it up really, really well. Okay? And then I'll use a piercing tool. I'm OCD. You might want to stop right here. So if I see a little teeny little something, I see just a tiny little bit by the S to make it perfect. There we go. Okay, I think that looks just great. So the Take-A-Pick and the piercing tool are my rule number 4 on ways to kind of clean it up and get it ready and stray free as well. I call those little things that will float away strays. Then I have the Stampin' Up! Heat tool, and my next tip is to allow the heat tool to heat up for about 5 seconds so that it's not blowing cold air, and it will immediately start to heat and set your embossing powder. So let's go ahead and do that. I still love the way this just, you know, embossing just sort of pops out and just does the most amazing things. And as I said, if there's a little bit of the chalkiness left from the Stampin' Buddy, you can wipe that lightly with your hand. You don't want to transfer oils, but you can wipe that lightly after you heat emboss. So I'm really happy with that. I can see that all the areas that I was heat embossing are now shiny and raised. And then I will go ahead and I will bring this back in to show you a finished project. So again, I'll go over those rules very quickly, or tips. Use the Stamparatus. Number 1. Number 2, use the Embossing Buddy. Number 3, make sure your Versamark ink pad is well inked. Number 4, use a paper piercing tool as well as the Take-A-Pick to remove any little strays before you heat emboss. And then finally, number 5 was allow the heat tool to heat up for about 5 full seconds so that when you heat, you're not blowing cold air and you immediately start to heat and set your stamp image. So thank you for joining me for my 1 minute to wow. I should just say it's just my wow tutorial. It was more than a minute today and really was more about embossing and embossing 101 and my 5 tips. So please stop by my blog. As I said, I have daily inspiration and ideas as well as free PDF tutorials. I love your comments. If you have a second, leave me a comment in YouTube. Perhaps you have a tip you want to share about heat embossing as well. Or I just love to hear your feedback. What did you learn? What was new? And how much you love heat embossing? Those kind of things. And I promise to promptly respond to each and every comment. Thank you and bye-bye.